Very good morning, students. Welcome to Science Session for Class 9. And in Science, we have completed 3 lessons. That is Unit 1, Measurement, Unit 10, Matter around us, and Unit 17, Atom. And today in this session, we are going to see an interesting lesson, that is Unit 11, Atomic Structure. Now, in this lesson, we are going to see Rutherford's gold foil experiment, what is Bohr's atomic model, what are the very good morning, students. Welcome to Science Session for Class 9. And in Science, we have completed 3 lessons. That is Unit 1, Measurement, Unit 10, Matter around us, and Unit 17, Animal Kingdom. And today in this session, we are going to see an interesting lesson, that is Unit 11, Atomic Structure. Now, in this lesson, we are going to see Rutherford's gold foil experiment, what is Bohr's atomic model, what are the postulates of this atomic model, and how to calculate the number of protons, neutrons and electrons, what is atomic number, what is mass number, and we are going to draw the atomic structure of first 20 elements, and what is nucleus and what is law of chemical combination. Let's go into the session, children. Now, there are many theories that has been put forth to know about the internal structure of an atom or to know about the subatomic particles. Now, in 8th standard, you would have learnt about Dalton's atomic theory and J.J. Thomson atomic model, isn't it? So, these were put forward to know about the atomic structure of the atom. Now, we'll see about the discovery of the nucleus by Lord Rutherford, and he has performed an experiment which is called as the Rutherford gold foil experiment. Now look into the screen, children. This is the apparatus that is apparatus setup for the experiment, and on your left hand side you have the radium source of alpha particles, which is the source from which the radiations, that is the beam of the alpha particle comes, and the ring like structure is the detector which detects the beam of alpha particle, and in the middle of the detector is the thin gold foil. It is a very thin gold foil. It is made as thin as possible because gold is chosen because gold is the most malleable metal, and the alpha particle come from the source, hit the gold foil, and it gets deflected. Now he has observed 3 things, that is, most of the alpha particles pass straight to the gold foil, some of the alpha particles slightly deflect from their straight path, and the third one is very few alpha particles completely bounce back. Now, based on this observation, he has put forward the Rutherford's atomic model. Now, according to this model, the atom contains large empty space, and the positively charged atoms accumulate at the center of the atom, which is called as the nucleus. The size of the nucleus is very small compared to that of the atom because the nucleus is present inside the atom. The electron revolves around the nucleus in the circular path, which is called as the orbit. Now, on the whole, the atom is neutral because the number of protons that is present inside the nucleus is equal to the number of electrons that is revolving around the nucleus. So these are the postulates of the Rutherford atomic model. Now he has compared this model with the solar system. The sun is at the center. Similarly, in the atom, the nucleus is at the center, and the planets revolves around the sun, and here the electron revolves around the nucleus in the orbit or shells. Now let's see the limitations of the Rutherford's model. Now, the only drawback of the Rutherford model is that a moving electron should accelerate and it has to lose energy. If the electron is revolving around the nucleus, it has to lose its energy and finally it has to fall into the nucleus. Now look into the picture, children. The electron, the negative electron, is revolving around, isn't it, in the orbit. Now if it is revolving around, if it is accelerating, then it has to lose the energy and finally it will come and fall into the nucleus, but it doesn't happen. We know that atoms are very stable. Now if this fall into the nucleus, the atoms become unstable, but we know very well that the atoms are stable. So the Rutherford failed to explain the stability of the atom. So he did not give explanation about the stability of the atom. So this is the limitations of the Rutherford's model. Niels Bohr in 1930 explained the stability of an atom, and the main postulates of Bohr atomic model is that the first thing is that the electron revolve around the nucleus in a circular path called orbits, shells or energy levels. Look into the picture, children. The nucleus is at the center, isn't it? No, you can see different shells, isn't it? K shell, L, M, N. So these are the energy levels in which the electrons revolve around, and these shells are given the alphabets or the variable that is K, L, M, N. An electron in a shell can move to an higher level or the lower level either by absorbing energy or releasing energy. Now, usually an electron moving from a lower energy level to the higher energy level has to absorb energy to move to the higher level. Now, here you can see there are different shells, isn't it? Now, if an electron has to move from K shell to the L shell, it has to absorb the fixed amount of energy and it has to move to the higher level. Now, the orbit which is close to the nucleus, that is the K, will have the least amount of energy, and the electron present in it will be called as K electrons, right? Similarly, the L shell is called as the L electrons, right? So Bohr called these as energy levels or energy shells. Now, how is the stability explained here? Since the electrons that is revolving around the nucleus is not going to gain energy or not going to lose energy, so they will revolve in their orbit continuously. So this explains the stability of the atom. Now let's talk about neutrons. Neutrons was discovered by James Chadwick in 1932 when he was working on the alpha rays. Beryllium was exposed to alpha particles, and he could see that the particles with the same mass as that of the proton was emitted. You can see the equation. Beryllium with the alpha rays gives carbon and neutrons. So neutron has the same mass as that of the proton was emitted. The emitted electrons did not carry any electrical charge, and these were called as neutrons. Now look into the table, children. These are the properties of subatomic particles. Now the electron symbol is given by E minus 1, 0, where minus 1 is the atomic number and 0 is the mass number. Proton, H, it is usually denoted by H. 1, 1, the atomic number and the mass number is 1. And the neutron is denoted by N0, 1, right? And the charges, if you see, the electrons are negative charge, so minus 1. Protons are positive charge, that is plus 1. And neutron do not carry any charges. Look into the picture, children. This is the structure of an atom showing the orbits and the nucleus. Now at the center you have the nucleus, and the nucleus contains protons and neutrons. So the neutrons and protons together is called as nucleons, and it is present inside the nucleus. And you can see the circular rings, isn't it, around the nucleus. So these are called as the orbits, and the electrons revolve in the orbits or shells or energy levels or energy shells. Now here the orbits is how it is defined. Actually, orbit is defined as the path by which the electron revolve around the nucleus, and collectively the protons and the neutrons are called as the nucleons, and it is present inside the nucleus. And when you talk about the charges, it is said that the atom is neutral because the number of protons and the number of electrons that is revolving around the nucleus is equal. So the atom on the whole is neutral. Now let's see what is atomic number and mass number. Always the element is represented in the form of a symbol. For example, nitrogen is represented by N. Chlorine is represented by Cl, aluminium is represented by Al, hydrogen is represented by capital H. Now, when the element is represented by the symbol, the number which is written below the symbol is the atomic number, and the number which is written above is the mass number. Now, atomic number is denoted by the letter Z, and atomic number is equal to number of protons or number of electrons. Either the number of protons or the number of electrons can be considered to calculate the atomic number. Now, going to the mass number is denoted by the letter capital A, which is nothing but the sum of number of protons plus number of neutrons. Now when you add number of protons and number of neutrons, you get the mass number. So this is the formula for mass number. Mass number is equal to sum of the number of protons and number of neutrons. Atomic number is equal to number of protons or number of electrons. Now see this example. Now N represents the symbol for nitrogen, and the number written below, that is 7, is the atomic number, and the number which is written above is the mass number. So the atomic number of nitrogen is 7 and the mass number of nitrogen is 14. So this is how the atomic number and the mass number is represented along the symbol of the element. Let's see the electronic configuration of the atom, how the electrons occupies the different energy levels. We know that there are different energy levels and these shells are represented as K, L, M, N, isn't it? We have seen in the Bohr's atomic model. Now we'll see the distribution of the electrons in these different cells. Now that is called as the electronic configuration. So electronic configuration is nothing but the distribution of the electrons in the different shells. Now you have certain rules to fill the electrons in the shell. The first rule is that a maximum number of electrons that can occupy in each shell is given by the formula 2n square. So using this formula you can calculate the number of electrons that can occupy in the shells K, L, M, N. The next one is that the shells are filled in the stepwise manner in the increasing order of their energy. Now I should not fill the L shell first before filling the K shell. So it should be in an order. First the electrons should occupy the K shell, then L, then M, and at last the N. So it should be in the stepwise manner. The third rule is that the outermost shell of an electron cannot have more than 8 electrons. Even if it has more electrons to accommodate, it cannot accommodate more than 8 electrons. So each shell can contain the maximum of only 8 electrons. Now let's see how the numbers, that is the maximum number of electrons that can occupy in each shell, is calculated using the formula 2n square. Look into the screen, children. Here you have the shells that is named as K, L, M, N, and the number, it can be represented in number as n is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. And here using this formula I am going to calculate the number of electrons, maximum number of electrons that can occupy in the shell. So the first K, n is equal to 1. So 2 into 1 square will give you 2 into 1, that is 2. So now n is the second shell, isn't it? So n will be equal to 2. So 2 into n square is 2 square. So 2 into 4 is 8. So L shell can occupy 8 electrons. M is the third shell. So n is equal to 3. So 2 into 3 square is 2 into 9 is 18. So M can maximum accommodate 18 electrons. Now n is equal to 4. This is the fourth shell. So 2 into 4 square, that is 2 into 16 is 32. So n shell can accommodate maximum 32 electrons. So this is how the number of electrons that can occupy in these respective shells are calculated using this formula 2n square. Let's see the electronic configuration of few of the elements. Now we know that the K shell can occupy 2 electrons, L shell can occupy 8, and M 18, and N 32. Now we also have said the rules, isn't it? 3 rules. Now we said that the first is that the maximum number of electrons that can be occupied by N shell is calculated using the formula 2n square, and there should be in stepwise manner, that is K should be filled first, K shell should be filled, then L, then M, then N. Next we said that the though it has the capacity to occupy more than 8 electrons, the valence shell will occupy only 8 electrons. Now let's see an example. Example is calcium 2040. The atomic number is 20 and the mass number is 40. But for the electronic configuration, we take into account the atomic number, not the mass number. Using the atomic number, we are going to write the electronic configuration. Now here for calcium, the atomic number is 20. Now how it is filled? First, the K shell will occupy 2 electrons. Now remaining L will occupy 8 electrons. Though M can have space for 18 electrons, it will occupy only 8 electrons, and the N shell will occupy 2 electrons. Now when you add these together, you will get 20. This is 10 and this is 10. So 20. So the atomic number is 20. So here, though the M and the N shell can occupy 18 electrons and 32 electrons respectively, but the maximum electrons that can be accommodated by a shell is 8. So here you cannot fill as 10. Here it should be 8 electrons. So here the electronic configuration, how will you write it? The electronic configuration of calcium is 2, 8, 8, 2. So this is how you write the electronic configuration. Now let's see in another example, that is aluminium 1327. Now 13 is the atomic number and 27 is the mass number. To write the electronic configuration, we need the atomic number, not the mass number. So atomic number is equal to 13. Now how it is filled? Now here K, L, M shells we have, isn't it? So first 2 electrons, then L will occupy 8 electrons, so totally 10. The remaining is 3. So the M shell will occupy 3 electrons. Now how will you write the electronic configuration? Electronic configuration of aluminium is 2, 8, 3. Now the element can be represented with the atomic number and mass number like this, isn't it? So oxygen, O is the symbol for oxygen, and 8 is the atomic number and 16 is the mass number. So mass number is equal to 16, atomic number is equal to 8. Now using this mass number and atomic number, we are going to calculate the number of subatomic particles, that is how many protons, electrons and neutrons are present using this information, that is atomic number and mass number. Now we know that the atomic number is nothing but the number of protons or electrons, isn't it? The formula for the atomic number is number of protons or number of electrons. So since the atomic number is 8, so the number of protons will be 8 and the number of electrons will be 8. Now how to calculate the number of neutrons? So this is the formula to calculate the number of neutrons. Number of neutrons is equal to mass number minus the atomic number. When you subtract this mass number and the atomic number, you will get the number of neutrons. So 16 minus 8 will give you 8. So the number of neutrons is 8. So the formula to calculate the number of neutrons is mass number minus the atomic number, and this question is a very, very important question. It is simply the subtraction between the mass number and the atomic number. Let's see what is valence electrons and what is valency. Now before going into what is valence electrons, let's see what is valence shell. The outermost shell of an electron is called as the valence shell, and the electrons that is present in the valence shell is called as the valence electrons. Now for example, if you take oxygen, in the oxygen, the valence electrons, that is the electrons that is present in the outermost shell, will be 6. So for oxygen, the valence electron is 6. So this valence electrons plays a very important role, because the chemical properties of the element are based on these valence electrons, because these valence electrons take place in the chemical reaction. So since it is taking place in the chemical reaction, this will decide the chemical properties. Now the element with the same number of valence electrons will show similar properties, and if the valence electrons of two different elements are different, then those elements will have different chemical properties. Now let's see what is valency. Now valency is nothing but the combining capacity of an element, or it is equal to the number of electrons that take place in the chemical reaction. Now let's see the valencies. Now first we'll see what is the valence electrons. Now see calcium. Now for calcium the atomic number is 20. So how will you write the electronic configuration? 2, 8, 8, 2. So how many electrons are there in the valence shell? In the valence shell, that is in the last shell, outermost shell, there are 2 electrons. So the valence electron is 2. Now consider aluminium. Aluminium atomic number is 13 and the mass number is 27. And the electronic configuration will be 2, 8 and 3. So the outermost shell consists of 3 electrons. So the valence electron is 3. Now we said that valency is the combining capacity of an element, isn't it? Now consider if the valence electron in the outermost shell is 1, 2 and 3, the valency of that particular element will be 1, 2, 3. Now for example, if an electron consists of 4, if the element consists of 4 electrons in the outermost shell, then its valency will be 4. Now if the element has 2 electrons in the outermost shell, then its valency will be 2. Now if the valence electron is 5, 6 and 7, certain elements can have 5 electron in the outermost shell, certain elements can have 7 electrons in the outermost shell. Then their valency will be, if the element consists of 5 electrons, valence electrons, then its valency will be 3. Now if the valence electron is 6, then the valency will be 2. And if the valence electron of an element is 7, then the valency will be 1. Now if the outermost shell consists of 8 electrons, then the valency of that particular element will be 0. The valence electron, if it is 1, 2, 3, the valency will be 1, 2, 3 respectively. And if the valence electrons are 5, 6 and 7, the valencies are 3, 2, 1 respectively. If the valence electron, that is the outermost electron, is 8, then the valency is 0. Look into the table, children, table 11.2. This consists of the elements from 1 to 20, that is first 20 elements of the periodic table, their symbol, their atomic number, mass number, electronic configuration and valencies. Now we were talking about the valencies, and I said that the elements having valence electrons 1, 2, 3, 4 will have the valencies 1, 2, 3, 4 respectively. Now here you can see from lithium to carbon, that is lithium, the atomic number is 3, beryllium 4, boron 5, carbon and 6. Now in the second shell, that is the L shell, the valence electrons are 1, 2, 3, 4 respectively. And what will be the valencies? The valencies will be 1, 2, 3, 4 respectively. So since lithium has 1 electron in the valence shell, the valency is 1. Beryllium contains 2 electrons in the valence shell, that is the outermost shell, so the valency is 2. Boron contains 3 electrons in the L shell, that is the valence shell, so the valency is 3. Carbon contains 4 electrons in the outermost shell, and its valency is 4. Next you can see the next 3 elements below the carbon, that is nitrogen, oxygen and fluorine. So the valency is 5, 6 and 7. You can see the valence electrons in the L shell is 5, 6 and 7. If the valence electrons are 5, 6 and 7, I said the valency is 3, 2, 1 respectively. So nitrogen consists of 5 electrons in the valence shell, that is the outermost shell, so the valency is 3. Oxygen contains 6 valence electrons, so the valency is 2. Fluorine contains 7 electrons in their outermost shell, so the valency is 1. Now I said that the elements with 8 electrons in their valence shell will be more stable and the valency will be 0. Now you can see neon in the last row. So it consists of 8 electrons in the L shell, which is the valence shell. So the valency will be 0. And most of the inert gases or the noble gases contains 8 electrons in their outermost shell, and the valency will be 0, so it will be less reactive. Look into the screen, children. You can see 3 elements, that is protium, deuterium and tritium. So now you can see the symbols of these elements, that is H11, H12 and H13. Now the number that is written below the symbol is the atomic number. In all the 3 elements, the atomic number remains the same, but the mass number varies. In protium, the mass number is 1, in deuterium, the mass number is 2, and in tritium, the mass number is 3. So the atoms of same element having same atomic number but different mass number is called as isotopes. So these are the atoms of same element, isn't it? These are the hydrogen isotopes, the isotopes of hydrogen, which is called as protium, deuterium and tritium. So all the 3 have same atomic number but different mass number. So these are called as isotopes. Once again, I'll repeat the definition. Isotopes are defined as the atoms of same element having same atomic number but different mass number. Look into the screen, children. You can see 2 atoms, isn't it? Now these are the atoms of different element. One is argon, the other one is calcium. Now here look into the atomic number. Atomic number of argon is 18 and atomic number of calcium is 20. So the atomic number differs, isn't it? Now look into the mass number. Mass number of argon is 40 and for calcium it is 40. So here the atoms of different element have different atomic number but same mass number. So these are called as isobars. Now look into the nucleons. Look into the nucleus, right? What are nucleons? Nucleons are nothing but the sum of the protons and neutrons together. We call it as nucleus, isn't it? Now the number of nucleons in both the atoms are same. Now here for the argon it is 18 protons and 22 neutrons, isn't it? And here it is 20 protons and 20 protons. When you add, you will get 40, isn't it? So the nucleons together remains 40. That is the mass number together remains 40. So the mass number for these elements is 40. The nucleons remains the same. Only there is a difference in the atomic number, and these are called as isobars. Look into the screen, children. These are the atoms of different element, that is boron and carbon. Now let's see the atomic number. Atomic number also differs. Atomic number of boron is 5 and atomic number of carbon is 6. Now what about the mass number? Mass number also differs. Then what is the similarity between these 2 elements? The number of neutrons remains the same. Now look into the nucleus. The proton is 5 in boron, isn't it? But when you talk about the neutron, it is 6 neutron. Come to carbon. Carbon also contains 6 neutrons. And now I said that the mass number minus the atomic number gives you the number of protons. Now look into boron. 11 minus 5 gives 6, isn't it? And carbon, 12 minus 6 will give you 6. So the number of neutrons remains the same. So these are called as isotones. Now how will be the definition of the isotones? Atoms of different element with a different atomic number and different mass number but with same number of neutrons are called as isotones. So boron and carbon are isotones because they contain same number of neutrons. Next we'll move to laws of chemical combination. Now during the chemical change, the substance is converted from one form to the other, isn't it? So converting one substance to the other is called as the chemical change, isn't it? So during the studies of chemical change, there were certain generalizations that were made, and these generalizations were called as law of chemical combinations. And the following are the laws of chemical combinations. The first one is law of conservation of mass. Second one is law of constant proportion, law of multiple proportions, law of reciprocal proportion, Gay-Lussac's law of gaseous volume. Now out of these 5 laws of chemical combinations, you would have studied the first two, that is law of conservation of mass and law of constant proportion, in 8th standard. Today in 9th standard you will be learning about law of multiple proportion, law of reciprocal proportion, and Gay-Lussac's law of gaseous volume. Now this law states that when two elements combine to form more than one compound, the mass of the first element, which separately combines with the fixed mass of the other element, are in simple ratio. Now let me explain this with an example. Now there are two compounds, that is carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. Now the mass of the carbon in both the compound is the same, that is 12 and 12, that is, but when you compare the mass of oxygen, there is one oxygen atom in carbon monoxide, and in carbon dioxide there are two oxygen atoms. So the mass of oxygen in carbon monoxide is 16 and in carbon dioxide is 32. Now here you have the fixed mass of carbon in both the compound, but in oxygen it differs. Now when you find out the ratio of the oxygen, it is the element B combining with the fixed element A to form the compound. Now this will be in simple ratio. So the ratio of oxygen in carbon monoxide to the oxygen in carbon dioxide, if you see, the ratio will be, it will be actually 16:32, isn't it? So when you simplify, it will become 1:2. So the element which separately combines with the fixed element, here the fixed element is B, so this will be in simple ratio, and here the simple ratio is 1:2. Now here is the another example of sulfur forming its oxide. So it will form two oxide, that is sulfur dioxide and sulfur trioxide. Now the formula is SO2 and SO3. Now if you see the mass of sulfur, it will be 32, but the mass of oxygen is 32:48, because two oxygens are there, so 16 into 2 will become 32, and here 3 oxygens are there, so 16 into 3 will become 48. So when you see the ratio, it will be 2:3. So the ratio of oxygen in sulfur dioxide and oxygen in SO3 will be in the ratio 2:3. So this is about law of multiple proportion. Now let's go to law of reciprocal proportion. Now before stating the law, let me explain this law with an example. Now here carbon is the element which combines with hydrogen and oxygen to form CH4 and CO2. Now carbon combines with two different elements, that is oxygen and hydrogen, and it forms two different compounds, that is CH4 and CH2. Now the elements that combines with carbon, if they combine together, it will form H2O, that is hydrogen and oxygen, if they combine, they will form H2O. Now let's find out the ratio. Now look into the table, children. Now here the carbon combines with hydrogen and oxygen to form CH4 and CO2. Now here are the combining weights that is given. So carbon, one atom of carbon takes place, so the weight will be 12, and for the other compound, that is CO2, will also be 12. But the hydrogen, 4 hydrogen takes place in CH4, so 4, and here 2 oxygen atoms, so that is 16 into 2 is 32. Now when you find the ratio between the atoms that is combining with the carbon, that is hydrogen and oxygen, so it is 4:32, isn't it? So when you simplify, it will become 1:8. So these are the ratios of different element that is combining with the same element, that is carbon. Now the ratio is 1:3. Now I said that if these two elements that is combining with carbon combine together, it will form the water molecule, isn't it? Now I'll find out the ratio of the water molecule, that is the ratio of mass of hydrogen and oxygen. So there are 2 hydrogen atoms, so that is 2 into 1 will become 2, and since 1 oxygen takes place, so it is 16. So when you find the ratio, it is 2:16. When you simplify, it will become 1:8. Now if you compare these two ratios, they are same. Now let me state the law. Now I'll state the law now. If two different elements combine separately with the same weight of the third element. Now what is the two different element? Hydrogen and oxygen combines with the same weight of the third element. What is the third element here? Carbon, isn't it? Now the ratio of the masses in which they do so. Now these two, when they combine, are either the same or simple multiples of the ratio in which they combine. So when you find the ratio of the two different element that is combining with the same element, that is hydrogen and oxygen, the ratio is 1:8. And when these hydrogen and oxygen, when they combine together to form different compound, that is water, and if you find the ratio, it will also be the same, that is 1:8. So this is called as law of reciprocal proportion. Now let's move to Gay-Lussac's law of combining volumes. Now, according to this law, whenever the gases reacts together, the volume of the reacting gases will be in simple whole number ratio, provided the condition, that is the temperature in which, the temperature and the pressure in which they are measured should be in similar condition, right? Now look into the picture, children. You can see that the reaction of the formation of water, right? Now 2H2 plus O2 will give you 2H2O. Now here two volumes of, when you balance the reaction, you will find that the number of atoms on the either side is same, isn't it? Now here two volumes of hydrogen combines with one volume of oxygen to form two volumes of water. Now when you see the ratio of the volumes of these gases that they combine will be in simple whole number ratio. That is, when you see the ratio, it is 2:1:2. This is what the law states, that whenever the gases react together, the volumes of the reacting gases as well as the product bear a simple whole number ratio, provided all the volumes are measured under similar conditions of temperature and pressure. Ratio of the reacting gases and the products are in the ratio 2:1:2 for this example, that is the formation of water vapor. Now let's move to quantum numbers. Now children, if I ask you to write the address of your location, how will you do it? First you will mention your flat number, then the street address, then the city, then the state, and at last the country, isn't it? So these are the way in which you write your address, isn't it? Similarly, the location of the electron in the atom can also be specified very clearly using these quantum numbers. There are 4 quantum numbers. Now let's define the quantum number. The number which designate and distinguish the various atomic orbitals and electrons present in the orbit is called as quantum number. So using these quantum numbers, you can specify the address of the electron that is present in the atom. That is, you can mention the atomic orbitals, in which specific atomic orbitals where exactly it is present. Now, the first quantum number is the principal quantum number, which gives you the information about the main energy level, that is the shell. Now we have learnt about the shell, isn't it? KLMN. So this gives you the idea about the electrons in which particular main energy level. So the symbol for the principal quantum number is N. The next one is the azimuthal quantum number, which is denoted by the symbol small l, which gives you the subshell. Now the subshell here is SPDF. Now you don't have to go much in detail with this because you will learn in 10th standard. So this will specify the subshells or the shape of the orbitals. Orbitals are nothing but the subshells that is present inside the main shell. The next one is the magnetic quantum number, which is denoted by small m. This will give you the orientation of the orbital. Next is the spin quantum number, that is denoted by small s, which gives you the spin of the electron, whether it is in the clockwise direction or in the anti-clockwise direction. So using these quantum numbers, the specific identification of the electrons in the atom can be done. Now with this we come to the end of the lesson, children. So in this lesson we have learnt about Rutherford's gold foil experiment, Bohr's atomic model, what is atomic number, what is mass number, how to calculate the number of neutrons, what is electronic configuration, how to write the electronic configuration of the element, what is valence electrons. Now how is the valency calculated using the electronic configuration, and the isotopes, isobar and isotones, the examples that we have seen, and the law of chemical combinations, where you have 5 laws, out of which we have learnt 3 laws in this chapter. Now your homework for today is in page number 131. Look into the screen, children. In page number 131, you have the geometrical representation of the atoms of first 20 elements. Now see to that you draw all these 20 elements geometrical representation in your classwork and submit your classwork in the school office, and we'll meet in a new session in the new lesson. Thank you, children.